Andrew, how are
Steve,
you?
it's good to be back. How are
Yeah,
you?
it's been a minute here since we did a quick 30-minute podcast, and had several people asking me both online and directly, "Hey, when are you guys going to do a part two?" Because we kind of you actually alluded to that at the end of it. You said something
Yeah,
about, yeah, let's next time
let's
let's
do it
do an
again.
hour. So you dangled that out there. So here we are now, committed because of you to have to talk for an hour for part two about something.
It's still amazing to me that anyone would want to listen to the two of us talk about anything for longer than 3, 4 minutes, but
I
here we
think they
are.
just, they just keep waiting for me to say shit or shitty little apps or something like that. That seems to get them all excited. So
So do you think on phrase to describe the same thing, shitty little apps or craplets? What are you, a Steve Mordew guy or a Ryan Jones guy?
yeah, I mean that's kind of the choice you have to make.
Yeah, I
And
mean,
and I was when I was talking to him and he brought that up, it didn't sound like it was off the cuff. It sounded like it actually was an internal, non-official term for, what I was calling shitty little apps that they kind of Microsoft cleaned it up a little bit to craplets. But I mean, the idea is the same, right? I mean, I think one of the challenges with, and we've talked about this. I don't know if we talked about it last time on the pod, but we've talked about it separately about the terrible injustice that Microsoft brought to the Power Platform when they first launched that and decided the customer for this is Sally in HR, who
yeah,
doesn't know technology, and she can build her own apps. And it's really just kind of a travesty that they completely overshadowed what it really was to go so deep and over-index so hard on that citizen developer angle. Um,
hmm Yeah. Well, when I heard Ryan's phrase "craplets," of course, it made me think of you, and then I realized you were in the meeting when this phrase was uttered. So all the pieces came together.
yeah, I'm the one he
Um,
uttered it to.
yes, yes. But I've wondered at times, and the more time passes, the more convinced of this that I am, that folks inside of Microsoft who actually build this technology, right? I think it's just galling to them when they see it being used for some of the not for some of the, I mean, listen, if you can make small kind of productivity toys, or as you and Ryan Jones have less charitably phrased it, shitty little apps and craplets, right? If you can make those using the tech, then God bless you. I think it's great, more power to you. But you have to think that, folks building three-screen apps on top of SharePoint lists is not why some of these brilliant technologists in the product group decided to enter this profession
Oh
and have
no,
dedicated years of their life to.
no, clearly marketing had a heavy hand in this.
Yeah.
And they weren't the first with low code, right? There was some other low
Mhm.
code apps out there. And I think some of those other low code apps, because they were built on maybe not as robust an infrastructure as like the XRM platform, but were really
Yeah.
built to be low code from the jump, were kind of citizen focused because I don't think they had enough, horsepower to do much more than that. But they were getting
Mhm.
some traction. So it obviously, I think, exposed to Microsoft that there's a market out there for Sally in HR who wants to build her own app to make a check-in, check-out thing. There's a market for that.
Mhm.
And I think they estimated that it would be very large, and it was.
Mhm. Yeah.
I mean, there's no disputing that. I mean, they definitely there's a lot of shitty little apps out there, and I use that term pejoratively, but
Yeah.
basically what I'm trying to say is it's an insult to what the platform can do to have that be promoted as the extent of it.
Yeah.
They're pivoting, however. We're seeing a pivot from them that started at I think MVP Summit or maybe right around that time frame. Um, where Ryan Cunningham had a slide up that even said something like low code or no code and had a line crossed through it. So we don't say that
Yep.
anymore. So I think they realized that while the citizen path was robust, it alienated their real target customer, which is enterprise organizations, because now they got in the enterprise IT's head that this is a toy builder.
Yeah.
So now they got to swing the pendulum back the other way.
Yeah, and I think it's going to take a lot of doing on Microsoft's part and on the industry and I should probably say the community of practitioners in this space, not the industry. And let's come back to that in a moment. It's going to take, I think, several years to swing that pendulum back the other way because now the idea that this technology is made to build toys is so entrenched in the minds of CIOs and enterprise architects and et cetera, et cetera. But I actually I've been working with Microsoft, and I've got a couple of white papers coming out the next, I would say probably all told over the next 8 weeks or so. The
Mhm.
first one is done and drafted, and it just needs to be, I think we're just waiting on the final layout, but it's Power Platform in a modern data platform architecture. And it goes into, basically what are the patterns and best practices for integrating your Power Platform solutions to not just Fabric, but to the Azure data platform more broadly. And that's the kind of thinking and the kind of content that I think we really need. And I think we need to be targeting this to enterprise architects because we have a
Yep.
lot of work to do to get enterprise architects who don't go way, way back with XRM to
Mhm.
understand and be comfortable with everything they can do at an enterprise scale using Power Platform alongside Azure, not Azure and Power Platform separately from one another, but using these two product families in tandem with one another.
Yeah, I agree. As a matter of fact, in that meeting I had with Ryan and Mark Smith was with me at that, I had suggested that they may need to come up with another name, like, I don't know, Dataverse Pro, or pick something that is not Power Apps, because
Hmm.
you've kind of already shit on them, right? I mean,
Yeah.
the opinion is out there, the name is entrenched in IT's head of what it is, and
Hmm.
and it would be much easier to launch something new, even if it's the same damn thing underneath. But launch something new so they at least look at it, pay some attention to it. But he seemed convinced, and time will tell, that no, we can pivot the mind
We can.
share from what they think it is today. And I think that, I don't know why you would. I mean, it's not like Microsoft has trouble coming up with names. They blast them out left, right, and sideways. I don't know why they
I,
wouldn't take
I'm
this
thinking.
opportunity.
I'm thinking it's time. It's been a little while, at least a good year since we had a project Trident. I'm thinking that we need we could recycle DataFlex Pro or something of those along
Well, they
those
had to get
lines.
off of that one because it was trademarked by someone else. But
Too bad.
yeah, that was the reason they left Dataflex. Someone else had a trademark on it. I can't imagine. I mean, a company the size of Microsoft has got a legal team the size of
Right.
the biggest law firms didn't check the trademark before they launched a product name. Just insane.
I had, on a similar note, I remember I wrote a white paper a few years back, and I don't remember I don't even remember which white paper it was, but I referred to XRM, and and the editor of the white paper corrected it all throughout the white paper to be XML, and I said, no, it's XRM, and they said, no, 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 it's XRM isn't a real thing. XML, it's called XML. And I said, we're these are two completely unrelated technologies. XML does not have a trademark on the leading use of the letter X. And I had this big
Right.
debate with my editor of the paper on this, and I forgotten about it until just now.
That's funny. How many white papers have you written? You've done quite a few.
Yeah, I've probably, you know, and I realized a while back that I had fallen into this habit of writing white paper long pieces on my blog, and I was calling them
Right.
essays. But then I realized, wait, this is actually a white paper. So I would say, all told, 10 or a dozen, kind of meaningful. I love doing it. I love to write, and it's kind of a way for me writing one of those. It's such a heavy lift to do, but writing one almost helps me organize my thoughts and sort of test my thinking on something. So
Okay.
they're things that I write gladly. I love to do them. It's some of my favorite work.
Yeah, talking about things that you use for testing, I found that creating demo videos for our apps is where I discover a lot of things that were wrong with our apps, because you build this thing in pieces, right? Little components here, components there, and you get this picture in your head overall of what the thing's doing. And then you go, okay, I'm gonna open it up as a user and I'm gonna create screenshots and create a demo of how it works. And then you're looking at it, you go, what the hell is this? I can't figure this out. So demo videos are great for really finding flaws and finding errors in your thinking. I've written one white paper, and
Yeah.
I don't want to ever do that again. That is just too much work. I wrote one on the service as subscription model we talked about last.
Yep.
It was like
Yep.
34 pages, which is more than what I ever write usually about anything. And
Hmm.
I couldn't use my Steve Mordew voice because it's a white paper, so you have to be clean and proper and good grammar in a white paper. Too much.
I take some liberties with that. I write most of my white papers from first person, so I use my and we and I
Yeah.
um and I thought about this a while back and I decided to stick with it because I like that. I kind of like that. At least I don't find them to be less professional, but I do. At least in my own mind, I find them to be a little bit more accessible, right? It's like you're talking
Yeah.
with
Yeah.
someone who has an opinion about something rather than um, kind of I think artificially writing these very sterile documents. Though, so on the note of you doing demo videos, I have to ask: when I saw the most recent demo video for Rapid Start CRM, I wondered does that person exist or was that an AI generated video or did you hire that woman as a narrator or does she work on your team? Because I just thought it was a very well polished very well polished video. I,
It was a combination of the two.
okay,
The
okay,
person does exist,
okay,
but the video was AI generated.
okay.
So she posed for the all the 3D modeling and all the stuff that was needed to make that stuff work. So she's a real person, but the actual video itself is an avatar or
That's
she's the
pretty
avatar of the video.
amazing.
Oh,
That's
it's
pretty
good.
amazing.
Yeah,
I
it's
mean,
really good stuff.
I hope you will include a link to the video in the show notes, right? So to just sort of
Yeah.
give people an idea of what I mean, unless you're in the business of producing demo videos, you probably don't realize that you can do something like that nowadays.
And if you are in the business of producing demo videos, you need to be exploring that because that makes things so much faster and so much easier
Yeah.
than actually. I mean, if you're going to have a person in one, which I think there should be, at least down in the corner, maybe introducing. If it's nothing but screenshots and a voice, a mystery voice in the background, they don't seem that
Hmm.
engaging. So
Yeah,
yeah, I was definitely very happy with the way those turned out.
that's
They're
awesome.
also
So
inside all our apps too. So we got on all our forums, there's a little button you can push to open up a little video explains the forum. So she's in there as well. So probably I don't know across all four apps demos, there's probably 100 videos.
so I have a ringing endorsement of your product, Rapid Start CRM. Then I have a serious question for you. My ringing endorsement is that I will admit Cloud Lighthouse, and there's several of us who will be making announcements soon now within Cloud Lighthouse. But we use a custom power app that we built from scratch because we just have the nature of our business. We're not an implementation partner. Like we're all kind of architecture and expertise and strategy. So we built something custom. So my ringing endorsement of Rapid Start CRM is we don't use it. But if we didn't use something else, we would probably use Rapid Start CRM. I don't know if you can get that onto a slide, but you
Yeah.
heard it here first.
So did you actually try and solve your problem in Rep Start first, or did you assume that you would need to go custom right out of the box?
I just assumed, to be honest. I did not. There wasn't
I
a lot
think
of market research in this. This was Andrew
sure.
wants the app a certain way, so
Yep.
Andrew is going to get way down in the weeds, way deeper than he should be, and build the damn app. And that's how this went down.
Yeah, I thought this was your story was going to end a little differently because I've heard several times from people who said they decided to build a basic CRM app for themselves and then saw ours out there and tried it and decided why bother? We'll just customize this. So
Right. No, I mean maybe we should have. Maybe we should have. But
yeah.
at the time it was just me, so I was just building it for myself. But in
Well,
any case,
you got to keep your hands in in things too. You can't just completely consult and advise. You've got to you got to get your hands in. If you're going to tell people about
yeah.
co-pilots, you better be messing around with co-pilots and working with the studio and stuff like that. Otherwise, you
Are
know,
you sick of talking about Copilot? Are you
I am
sick of
very sick of it. I'm
like
very sick of it. And you know what? I don't think the end is in sight. I
no.
mean, I don't even think we've seen the worst of it yet. I mean, I think it's just going to continue. Microsoft has clearly bet the farm. I mean,
Oh yeah.
they bet the entire farm on this technology. I hope it gets them where they want to get, and I think it can accomplish what's necessary for business application users
Mm-hmm.
eventually.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think they need to reach AGI for the purposes of an agent in my sales app.
Mm-hmm.
I think they can get there on this path because I don't believe that we're going to reach AGI on the large language model path. I think they've just about milked that for all they can get out of it. And I think
Mm-hmm.
that true AGI is down another fork in the road that either hasn't
Mm-hmm.
presented itself yet or that they passed to go all in on
To
LLMs.
go the way they've gone. Yeah.
But I don't, I mean, I think there's still a lot of meat on this bone, but I don't think it gets you to AGI. So a lot of folks that are terrified of AGI, I think should probably not worry too much about that. Now, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I don't I I think I'm inclined to agree with you on the AGI front. Let me take it in a little bit of a rather than just saying, "Oh, Steve, I agree," which I
Yeah,
do, but let me take it
yeah.
in a bit of a different direction, and that's that I
So
hear
what people are
and
looking
I
for is the battle of the minds here.
right. I so I hear and I read a lot in the in the press, both kind of the technology circles and in more mainstream. I'm thinking the New York Times. Ezra Klein has done several, I think, really great podcasts on his New York Times podcast where he's covered the development of AI over the last 18 months or so. But one of the things that I hear keep coming up is the almost the minimization of AI in service of rather mundane challenges and problems. So something that I've heard Ezra talk about, right, is, well, I mean, I don't really see how, and I'm paraphrasing. So, Ezra, if you're listening to the show, please reach out. We'll be happy to have you as I'll be happy to have you as one of Steve's guests. But in any case, he's commented about, oh well, aside from kind of use in business settings or use in the enterprise, where are these technology vendors actually making money and making advances around AI? And I he's not the only one. I see this time and again where I think people consistently underestimate the impact that AI, even in its current form and on its current trajectory, can have in rather mundane applications and uses, right? So if you think about it, if you can, we have the Western world the developed world has a significant productivity challenge today, where productivity has really plateaued across most developed economies. And I think that if you could save the typical worker with a not super sexy job in an office, right? An hour or two a day, right? Because they have an AI assistant. Um, the kinds of productivity gains that you could unlock, I want to say at this level, like I'm playing a video game, right? But
Right,
the kind of potential that you can unlock, I think is extraordinarily vast. So I'm always perplexed when I hear people kind of minimize the value of what I will call unsexy artificial intelligence. And I wonder if this is because we're very conditioned to think of AI as being this sparkly, sexy, astonishingly breathtaking technology that's just going to fundamentally transform the world in really obvious ways that I think a lot of folks are not really seeing the forest from the trees here, and aren't really understanding that a lot of the progress yet to be made is going to be made quietly, not loudly.
Yeah, I mean, I think clearly, science fiction movies have not helped what people think of when they first think about AI. They're imagining their expectation is so high, uh,
Hmm.
and then when they drop back to thinking, oh, so it's going to save some office worker, a couple hours a day. That's not exciting or interesting,
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
I think they're minimizing because it's not really cool or neat, from their perspective, but from a business owner's perspective, being able to save 2 hours a day times all my employees as a result of some widgets stuck in some apps. I mean, that's a home run. I mean, I don't know that there's
Yeah.
been much of anything that's come along for as long as I can recall that's had that big an impact or potential
Hmm.
impact. But like you say, it's not sexy. It's not the shiny stuff. So yeah. And I
One
think,
of,
you talk about a writer, he doesn't have employees, right? He's a writer. He
mhm,
is an employee,
mhm.
so he wouldn't be in a position to appreciate. He's looking for the glitz and the glamour.
Hmm. Yeah. I do worry though that, and this is going to sound like a weird comparison, but stick with me here. And then I'm going to really pivot back to our last episode because I've been thinking about something. But that's the beauty of a two-man podcast. We can take this wherever we want.
Yeah,
But
exactly.
so I think back, you know, 15, 20 years ago to I guess I have to do the math on this. So yeah, well over 15 years ago, 20 years ago, to um the point the point in time when we, the economy, though, the 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 professional economy, decided that, wow, now we have all of these tools that enable people to do more for themselves, right? And it enables someone, no matter how busy they are, no matter what their bill rate is, no matter what their actual sort of training and their expertise is, it enables them to manage their own calendar. It enables them to book their own flights, to arrange their own meetings, to do all of these sorts of things. And I think that this had it was a well-intentioned kind of approach to productivity, but it had some really perverse effects. First of all, it wiped out an entire profession of people who were really actually very good at this, right? Like an
Yeah, yeah.
entire profession of office administrators and administrative assistants,
Travel
you know,
agents.
travel agents, etc. Actually, interesting note on that. I was talking with, we'll come back to travel agents. Um, and I think that these were uh, one, fairly decently paying jobs across the economy. Um, and and also this sort of DIY, do it yourself mentality about these sorts of activities that are really required to make an organization function, kind of demeaned the value and the expertise required to get those tasks done. And the other upshot of this, right, is that now you have people in a lot of job roles whose training is not to run, to keep the trains running inside of the office, or to keep the trains running inside of the business, who expend enormous amounts of their day to keep the trains running. So I hope that with AI and some of the, with Copilot and some of these related technologies, we don't repeat the same mistake of just assuming that the answer is to let the technology solve the problem for the individual, rather than actually having practitioners who are very, very good at solving the problem with the technology. I hope we don't go through another round of shifting a lot of that keep the trains running on time burden onto people who really should be focused on doing other things.
Well, I agree, but of course, that's exactly where it will go.
Of course, what we're going to do.
I mean,
Yeah.
it's obviously. I mean, business is run by capitalists and business owners and the stock market, and it's all driving in a particular direction. Creating value for its shareholders or owners. And there's two sides of that: increasing revenue, which everybody's out there working hard to do all the time, and the other equal side of that is decreasing cost. You get just as much
Hmm.
value out of a dollar saved as a dollar earned in business,
Hmm.
and that is going to come under real pressure. When you talk about some of the advances earlier that wiped out some of the folks in the business, well, that was business leadership saying, hey, we don't need them anymore because we're now able to do a half-assed job of it on our own, so we don't need the
Yeah.
professional anymore. This is going to take that same path, in my opinion.
See, but I think though that in hindsight, if we were to look at this last generation of, oh,
Who
the
does
tech
that?
can,
who
well, we're
who
doing
looks
that
back?
because we're doing that because this is a
Yeah,
podcast and we can
yeah,
talk
right.
about whatever we
We have the
want.
benefit.
Also, I heard from Mark Smith that the algorithm does not like the word podcast anymore. It prefers show. So
A
this is
show.
a show.
It's a
So
show.
we are rebranding the
Okay.
Ecosystems podcast as the Ecosystems show.
Cool.
Um,
I like
that's what I
that.
heard from Mark, and I trust almost every word that Mark Smith says. So
I'm good for 3 out of 4 of them.
so but in hindsight, I would say that if you take you look at our industry, right? If you take a solution architect, let's say a typical solution architect in the US, and rates are going to be always going to be higher in the US than say in Western Europe, but plus or minus some percentage, a solution architect is billing out from a partner at $250 an hour, something like that, right? And I would wager to say that it's fairly common for a typical solution architect to spend 4 hours a week, so a half day a week, managing their calendar and juggling meetings and those sorts of tasks, which means that you are spending $1,000 a week on
Yeah.
every solution architect to have them keep their own train running on time. So I would actually argue that in hindsight, the economic impact of this is not all it was cracked up to be. And again, you could see this as the plateauing of productivity across the developed world, when one would think that the technological advances of the last couple of decades would have not had that result. So, something for an economist to dig into.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I don't see any way that AI does not end up costing a significant number of jobs,
No.
uh,
Yeah.
and costing them probably sooner than they should, because yeah, hindsight's 2020, but history always repeats itself.
Hmm.
And when an advancement in productivity for a company allows them to get more stuff with fewer people, they lay some people off.
Hmm.
It's always been the case. Robotics in manufacturing, you know, I mean, you look at the modern Amazon logistics warehouse, all these robots. They used to have hundreds of people, now they got like four. That are
Hmm.
basically sitting in an office, punching buttons. So there's not any way that this revolution isn't going to have a big impact on jobs.
We had a version of this discussion in one of my favorite episodes of what is now the Ecosystems show.
The show.
Um, yeah, maybe 6 weeks ago. It was my absolute favorite episode that we recorded, and one of the things we were talking about was, what are your greatest fears from AI? And there was we had a little bit of a monologue from Chris Huntingford about evil robot toasters or something like that,
Fair enough.
as you would expect, right? Uh, but I shared that my present greatest fear about AI is not that AGI, artificial general intelligence, is going to acquire a mind of its own and take over the world and enslave humanity. But it's actually that the advancements in the technology are going to far outpace the ability of society and of our politics to cope with the advancements of technology, right? It's one thing to say that, hey, there's a future, a utopian future, or even a not utopian, but still pretty good future, right, where humans are freed to to follow their passions and to do more interesting, more fulfilling work, because a lot of the grunt work has been taken on by AI. But that's not just a technological problem. That is an economic, a political, and a social
Hmm.
problem. And I just think that we're in for several years of a lot of upheaval that come from the technology outpacing the social and the political will to act here.
No doubt. I see some parallels with crypto. Here was a new
Hmm.
technology come along, blockchain, amazing
Hmm.
technology, permanent immutable ledger, just revolutionary. And of course, somebody's turning it into a currency. All right. Well,
Hmm.
that's got all the politicians and all the policymakers confused. Then, of course, the next wave, which we're going to see in AI and probably starting to already, are all the scam artists that will,
Oh yeah.
it's funny, we talk about, and we've got colleagues and folks in the business that are diving deep into this AI so they can understand it really well to get the most benefit for their customers. Well, the one group that is farther down the path than them are all the bad actors. They're
Hmm.
really deep down the path on that stuff to be able to do deep fakes, do all sorts of stuff. I mean, my mom gets these emails all the time. I've told her just don't respond to any email unless it's from me because yeah,
I
but
dare not tell
imagine
my mother that.
but imagine, I mean, the next wave of this is you're going to get you can get an email from your son asking him to send you some money. It's got a video of him, hey mom, I'm stuck at the airport. I mean, just the
Hmm.
ramifications are huge. So policymakers, lawmakers, politicians, they're as baffled with this right now as they still are with crypto and what to do with that monster. And
Hmm.
I see some parallels between those two things. A new technology, not a lot of people understand it very well.
Yeah.
They have that in common. And so what I don't understand, I obviously must fear. Um,
So let me connect these dots back to our last conversation. And for those of you who missed that conversation, we talked a lot about the subscription model,
hmm,
new business models for technology partners and consultancies. I work with several Microsoft partners that I really like. I believe in what they're doing. But one of the things that I find across not just the partners that I work with, but partners that I talk with, is that there's a lot of consternation out there in the market right now about how a partner evolves to be able, to have a business model that can actually make the most of AI, of Power Platform, of the data platform and the growth that we've seen around Microsoft Fabric and related technologies over the last year. And I think that partners that grew up and grew rich on the model of implementing workloads or implementing a big ERP or a big CRM. This is why I'm even more sick of talking about Dynamics than I am of talking about Copilot, right?
hmm.
Um, so I want to ask you, I mean, what do you think partners need to be doing right now, or what do you think partners need to stop doing, right, in order to be relevant and useful in this era that we've entered?
Yeah, I mean, you look back, what, 10 years ago, something like that, when the cloud hit Microsoft, because it hit Microsoft
Hmm.
late. They were
Yep.
latecomers to the cloud, and
It
all
was
the
they had a
partners.
new CEO, I think,
Yeah,
and
that
I
was
I
that was
can't
part
remember
of
his
it.
name, but
Yeah, yeah.
yeah,
Well, this
it was
I'm
all
going
right.
back even to Office 365
Yeah,
launch. So
no,
the,
I
the
know.
the real introduction of cloud to the Microsoft partner ecosystem, and none of them understood it. And the big fear they all had at the time was, how will we possibly make any money if we can't sell them all these boxes?
Yeah.
We got all these, they got this big room in the back of this building full of servers that we provide and we maintain. And now it's going to what, just connect to the internet and all those are no longer needed. How will we possibly make any money? That's three quarters of our revenue. is selling
Hmm.
those boxes and that big upfront cost of those boxes. So,
Yeah.
and many didn't survive. I think there's lots of partners that just couldn't make that
Do you
transition.
have numbers? Have you ever seen numbers on that?
I haven't, but I know that when you've got a partner, a smaller partner, maybe it's owned by a person who's been in the business for quite a while,
Hmm.
maybe up in years, and suddenly
Hmm.
some new technology comes along. They're just hoping to ride off in the sunset and retire before they get knocked out of business. But I
Hmm.
think that came faster than a lot of folks in that category were prepared for,
Hmm.
um, and just knocked a bunch of people, just right off their horse. Um, but new partners came out of the woodwork that didn't exist before that kind of were cloud from day one.
Yep.
But there was a big transition, and many partners obviously survived this transition. But the initial thought at the time was, oh my God, how will we make a living if all these boxes go away? And they're making a living, and they figured out how to
Hmm.
pivot. And I think
Hmm.
we're in a similar situation now. You mentioned in the last podcast about one of the challenges for partners with AI is going to be the direct impact it's going to have on their 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 hourly rates and what they're
Yeah.
able to bill and what they're able to get from those. When you're billing a customer, I don't know, 100 hours a week for doing stuff, and suddenly because of AI, your team is able to do that stuff in, I don't know, 75% of the time. Well, there's 20
Hmm.
25 billable hours that are no longer billable to that customer. And
Hmm.
if you continue taking that to its logical conclusion, and I don't know what the level of total productivity gain is, but you and I both hear it all the time about um, developers using
Hmm.
AI and reducing the amount of time it's taken them to do what was historically very tedious
Yeah.
stuff. I mean, talk about mundane. I mean, as an architect, you've got the most fun. The developer down down there, of course, I'm sure he must see it as fun, or he wouldn't have done it in the first place. But a lot of their job isn't really thinking about how to architect thing. It's thinking about how to make this task work. It's very step by step.
Hmm.
But then in doing so, they're writing zillions of lines of monotonous code and a lot of repetitive code that AI can now take off their shoulders. And I
Hmm.
think that we still have a lot of developers out there that are like, nope, I'm not going to use AI. I'm a professional developer. Okay, well, so's the guy next to you who's getting twice as much done in half the time
Right.
with actually better code. So that's going to be coming. And your point in the last episode, I think, was around, if your model is based on work by the hour and what you can get done in an hour, that is going to
Hmm.
be significantly challenged by AI removing at no cost to anybody parts of that hour that you could bill for.
Hmm.
So we're going to see declines in revenues of partners that are strictly on a, buy an hour and I'll give you an hour model, as opposed to pay me for this value, pay me for this outcome. What's this outcome worth to you as a business? How much are you willing to pay for this outcome? If I can provide this outcome in an exceptional way, uh,
Hmm.
I think it's going to shift to that more of a value mentality than a meter. It
I
has to.
think, yeah, and I think that I was talking with someone. I was talking with a client of mine recently who's had a lot of bad experiences with implementation partners. And his sentiment was that basically, and I should say that I've fallen into this pattern of referring to most partners as implementation partners because Cloud Lighthouse, my company, is a partner, but we don't do implementation, right? So I make
Mhm.
this distinction. But basically, he was saying, that he's found that most partners are terrible, right? Or that most partners are not actually very good. And I do think that we're very likely, in fact, set up for some carnage in the
Mm.
partner space, like in the consultancy space, where we make this transition from charging by the hour and from having very sort of unit of time, a unit of time is the unit of value, to the outcome or the quality of the work is the unit of value, the impact, you might say. And I think that we're set up for carnage, not just in terms of business model and billables, but also in terms of a lot of partners being outed as just not being very good at what they do. And
Yeah, yeah,
that's going to be really, I think that might be very different from the last time when we were making the transition from selling boxes, pre-configured boxes, and maintaining those boxes into more of the cloud space. I just think that, in a similar way as to how, Power BI and now AI have been very good at outing bad data, this transition in the IT services space might be very good at outing poor quality service.
yeah. I mean, I think that I get it, right? Partners are busy working, they're working their clients, they're trying to bill as many hours as they can, their head is
Yeah.
down, focused on what they're doing. One of the downsides of that is if your head's down, focused on what you're doing, then your head's not up looking at what's coming. And I've seen this for many years with partners
Hmm.
that tech, something has come along, they were unaware it was coming, it washed right over their head, and now they see it on the other side of them, and now they're in catch-up mode to try and figure out what that was.
Hmm.
Power Platform, cloud, even when that came out,
Hmm.
and a lot of on-premise partners just in denial until all of a sudden and so they were not at all prepared for cloud when it became real. They were just not prepared, and then they found themselves in this crazy catch up, trying to get trying to learn. And who do you learn on? You have no choice. You learn on your customers. So
Yeah.
lots of bad experiences with cloud migrations early on. Now, cloud migration is a fairly straightforward thing. It's a lot easier because people know what they're doing now, but at that time they didn't. And I've seen enough deployments. I mean, we got when we first got involved with Microsoft, we came over from Salesforce, so we knew cloud CRM, and that's what we wanted to focus on. But they pushed us to get into Office 365. Well,
Hmm.
that's not anything we had any knowledge or experience in, but they're like, here, we'll give you customers. Here, free money. Just take these customers and do it. And we did for a couple of years some of the worst work we've ever done because we didn't know what the hell we were doing. So you
Yeah.
talk about being outed at that time. If you were to dive deep into an Office 365 partner, we would not have stood up
Hmm.
to the scrutiny. We would definitely not have done it. But we know what we're doing on the business app side of the house, so we stick to our knitting there. And I think we see that across partners sometimes when they try and spread too wide, try and cover too
Hmm.
many bases. Unless you're a really big partner where you've got
Hmm.
enough people to cover that many bases, as a small partner, you need to pick one. You can't be an expert in everything.
So I have my thesis on this, and I'm happy you mentioned business apps partners specifically, but my thesis here is that, or my hypothesis, I guess you could say, is that um, uh, business applications partners are uniquely poorly suited for this transition. Um, and I can hear most of the listeners of this podcast howling at me
Oh, but
right
we're not
now.
talking about them. We're talking
But
about all the rest of them.
we're talking about all the rest of them,
Yeah,
right?
not
Actually, no,
you,
no, no.
listener, but everybody else.
I want to be clear. I want to be clear that I think that my theory on this applies to most BizApps partners. So just as a function of simple statistics, if you're listening to this, I probably am talking about you. I want to look right into the camera and say this. Um, and so my thought on this is that um, BizApps partners tend to, one, many of them come from an era where the business applications that they were implementing were the absolute center of their customers' IT ecosystem, right? We're talking about ERP and CRM, maybe HR, your HR management system, et cetera. So we're talking about these core business systems. So there's some psychology here where your thing that has always been the most important centerpiece of an organization's IT ecosystem is no longer the centerpiece because it's been supplanted by the data platform. Um, I think that we have the dynamic of lots and lots of really deep, really impressive functional expertise about specific business processes that I think are going to get thrown up in the air now. by by the advancements in both the data platform and in artificial intelligence. So that is that's a double-edged sword itself, right? That one, you've got people who are experts in things that are rapidly changing, and also folks on the functional side have much less expertise around the guts of the technology that actually sit under the hood and make the data platform work or make artificial intelligence work. And the third factor here for these BizApps partners is that their entire business model is built on big bang implementations where you labor for, and I've worked on ERP implementations, right? You labor for years, right? And you charge the customer a lot of money to implement something that then when it's done, you kind of go away, and they might call you back when they need to upgrade. And oh, by the way, those upgrades are not happening at this point because we're not on-prem. That
Hmm.
era of those big bang upgrades that follow the initial implementation is behind us. And I just think that for a host of reasons that are all sort of washing over one another like waves when the tide is coming in, right? BizApps partners are the most poorly suited, and that creates a ton of opportunity for the ones that can get it right and figure out how to fuse this wealth of business expertise that they have with the changes happening in technology. But on the other hand, I think a lot of them are going to have really tough times ahead. Does that ring to you? Is
Oh
that
yeah.
something you're seeing?
I mean, I think that, to your point about kind of incompetency being exposed, um,
Mm,
I think where we'll see that most is going to be in the in the power platform side of the BizApps house, because when you think about F&O,
oh yeah.
F&O is a big application. It's a complex application. It's a very important application. I think most of the partners in the F&O space are probably good partners at what they do. In
Hmm.
any of these spaces, there will be a percentage that is just kind of faking it until they make it.
Hmm.
But it's kind of tough to do that in F&O.
They're
Business
still going to
Central,
take a big hit on their revenue, though. I
yeah,
think
yeah,
as the
yeah.
without this upgrade, this cyclical pattern of upgrades, I think
They may take the
that's a
biggest
given for
hit.
them.
They
Oh,
may
absolutely.
F&O may take the biggest hit on that lack of that cyclical. Let's go ahead and replace all the software. Business Central partners probably come in second. There's a lot of those that have been at it for a long time from the NAV days
Hmm.
that I think are very capable, very competent. Sure, there's some fakers in there, but they don't get too far. On the BizApp side, down in Power Platform, XRM, CRM, that's Wild West.
Mm,
That's Wild
yeah.
West. I mean, there's no Microsoft actually at one time several years ago was going to require certification for you to be able to sell the SKU. Uh,
Wow.
yeah, that was how
I
serious.
miss that. I
Yeah,
miss
yeah.
this.
They never did implement it because I think they realized that would kill their business too much. But what they were realizing was we have a lot of customers having a bad experience with our product, and it's not our product. It's the partner who doesn't know what the hell he's doing, implementing it poorly, and we're getting the blame. So we should institute that in order to sell Dynamics, you have to be certified in Dynamics. But they
Hmm.
chickened out because I think they realized they'd lose too much revenue and better to deal with the aftermath. But as a result, I mean, like a lot of businesses out there, right? There's no certification required to hang up a shingle and say, I'm a Dynamics 365 customer engagement expert.
Hmm.
There's no,
Yeah.
yeah, there's no shingle that you have to hang up to make that claim and go start work for customers. We've got, and even worse on the BizApps Power Platform side is you've got these citizen developers that came out of a customer and got handy enough that they built a few apps, and now suddenly they're entering the marketplace as business apps experts as well with their citizen experience. So there's pressures on, I think, on all sides in the biz apps partner space around the competency side of
Yeah.
things.
Well, that kind of takes us full circle to the way we began the
Yeah.
conversation, because a lot of this, I think, has been in the especially in the early days is Microsoft's the Microsoft marketing machine's own doing, right? In saying, you know, listen, you've got that citizen developer that has done a great job, right? That is new to technology, is not a developer, doesn't have the background, and they built a really great app from this, from a low code tool. Or maybe they built 3, 4 really great apps, or 3, 4, complex flows, or whatever it might be, the thing that they built with Power Platform. And the the marketing machine, in order to promote Power Platform, promoted these individuals. Some of them they promoted very publicly, but even if they weren't promoting the specific person publicly, they were promoting for everyone that they, that they put a face on a face on a baseball card, right?
Yeah,
There were
yeah,
thousands and thousands more who I think were very rightly inspired. And by the way, I have friends and I have colleagues, and I've worked with some of the extraordinarily brilliant people who got their face on a baseball card a few years back, right? Those Power Apps Champs cards.
yeah,
But all of this excitement, I think it had the perverse effect of over promoting people into not just developer roles, but into solution architect or senior solution
yeah, right.
architect
Yeah,
roles. And I've seen it again and again, whether it's a situation where I've had a colleague and I've been a practice director or what have you, and I've had a colleague come in that was out of their depth, not because it was their fault or there was something wrong with them, but just that they were sold a lie about their own level of skill.
yeah,
And then the entire industry was sold a lie about their own level of skill. And I think that, and even if I've not worked with some of these folks, I've just heard horror stories of people coming from customers and entering partner land. And if you are new to partner land, you need to know that is a grueling, grinding life. Um, Especially if you come in at kind of a more senior, a mid-level, or a senior level. I mean, to get back to our hourly billing thing. I mean, that's the measure of that's the on paper measure of what you're producing for the business, and it's grueling. And I've just heard horror stories about people really struggling as they enter that world, and there are way too many folks out there that I think are still just fundamentally unsupported, and were over promoted before their time. And I just think it's going to be a big struggle for these biz apps partners to unpick this.
yeah. They got to be really struggling with imposter syndrome. I mean,
Yeah.
you have to know as soon as Microsoft's pulling you up on stage at the big conference to talk about the little app you built and how wonderful you are. You have to know that person just sitting up there wetting their pants because they know that you know I just went online and Googled it.
Yeah.
I just watched a
Yeah.
YouTube video on how to build it. So, well, I hope that we reach a point where, I mean, one of my fears with customers is that there was a time when we still have many customers out there who are like, we want a really good solution to the problem, an
Hmm.
exceptionally good solution. It doesn't have to be excellent because excellent is too much to ask for, but we also don't want a good enough solution. We want more than good enough. And my concern with particularly with the citizen movement inside of customers, it's led them to think, you know what, that's good enough. That's good enough. What would be interesting to see is, okay, what is the value to the company over time, ROI of savings, everything else, of taking good enough to very good, uh, to excellent? What is not perfect,
Yeah.
but what is the difference in value there? Because that's what you're giving away really by just having Citizen build some good enough stuff. But
This is a phenomenon actually that I'm seeing more and more, where organizations that have overbuilt on the Power Platform Basic, formerly known as the seeded licenses, right? The ones that
mhm.
come with Microsoft 365, and they built a bunch of apps, um, and they've stored their data in SharePoint in order to circumvent the cost of premium licenses. And of course,
Or they
that
were
always
unaware,
leads,
or
or
they
they were
weren't even aware
unaware,
it
or
existed.
they were
They
unaware.
think they think they're
Exactly.
building Power Apps.
Right.
They
Right.
think that is Power Apps. That's all it is. That's all they know.
E-
Yeah.
Exactly. And now what I'm seeing, I'm seeing a couple of things. First of all, I'm seeing some of the quite smart CIOs look at this and say, wait a minute, we are spending so much money in order to move data around and copy data because SharePoint isn't actually a database that, one, we spent a lot of money on workarounds. Two, we've made copies of copies of copies of data, often PII, personally identifiable information, that has now been copied from one SharePoint list to the next because SharePoint is not actually a relational database. And the latest cherry on top of this risk management nightmare has been that these unsecured SharePoint sites, all of that data is now part of the graph. And you know what uses data in the graph is Microsoft 365 Copilot. So I'm hearing now all of these horror stories about data that is sitting inside of an app that was built on top of SharePoint, and that data is now augmenting the large language model in the form of Copilot for M365. And I, I'm just CIOs' heads are
Well,
exploding, and they didn't realize that this was happening, and now it's a big problem for them.
it's a red flag for me when talking to a customer sometimes is when they say, well, let me show you this Excel app that our guy internally here
Not an
built.
app. Not an app.
And he opens up this Excel. It's got 27 tabs, macros, tables, logos, all format. I mean, years have been spent building this
Right.
business process on an Excel spreadsheet using
Yeah.
every Excel.
Ingenious.
The guy's a master of Excel. Every
Oh
trick
my
in the
God.
book, just a really sophisticated app built on an Excel spreadsheet. And I'm telling the guy, I said, well, I don't think you're really serious about, moving to a database foundational, business application for well, why not? Well, you approved him building that. I mean, it's kind of a red flag that if you're running a significant mission critical business operation on an Excel spreadsheet, I don't care how sophisticated it is, that's kind of where your head's coming from. And I don't think you can get from there to here because you're already
Yeah.
ready to stretch a free tool way, way too far.
Well, you must. You must. And let's leave everyone with this. This is a transition you absolutely must make, or you're not going to survive until the next transition. So seize the
Fair
moment. There's
statement.
opportunity ahead.
Fair statement. Well, Andrew, it was great catching up with you for this part two. We'll see how much of a clamor we get, if any, for a part three. Maybe we've covered it all.
Every
Again,
everything we had, we've covered it. Steve and Andrew are spent.
and I'll be seeing you in a couple of weeks.
I will see you in Slovenia for
Yeah,
the probably the best conference of the year.
definitely was. I was there last year.
Oh my God.
Most fun conference I've ever been to, and I expect them to repeat that. So, anybody listening, please go sign up if you probably still got time to get there. So,
Dynamics Minds.
Dynamics
Dynamics
Minds,
Minds.
be there or be
See,
square.
see you guys
The
soon.
squarest thing I could have said. All right, see you.
See you,
See ya.
Steve.